What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Bowl Report. I guess we're calling it. Tim May, the 40-year vet, over there on my side. Andy Backstrom on my other side. Let's talk about I'm Spencer Holbrook, obviously. And Tim,
Obviously.
yeah, it says it underneath there. I think people know by now who I am.
Yeah.
Tim, busy week for Ohio State, but not a busy week for Ohio State. Kind of the in-between right now between finally getting over the loss to Michigan a little bit inside the Woody Hayes Athletic Center, finally turning the page toward Missouri, getting back to bowl practice, and finally getting Marvin Harrison the recognition that he deserves after winning the Blitnikoff Award this weekend. He has just a banner week. Becomes a consensus All-American, then becomes a unanimous All-American for the second time, only the fifth Buckeye to ever be a two-time unanimous All-American, then earns the Chicago Tribune Silver Football Award for the best player in the Big Ten, first player from Ohio State since 2020 with Justin Fields after a couple years of Michigan guys winning it. Just, Tim, thoughts on the awards just continuing to roll in for one of the best players in the history of Ohio State football.
Yeah. I don't know if it's a banner week. It's more like a trophy case week, with big-time photos involved. By the way, my big take of the week so far is hearing that through the grapevine and JT Tuimoloau and Travion Henderson both practiced at the end of this week. So, we'll see where that goes. I'm not sure where Marvin Harrison Jr. fits in that regard. But, yeah, I mean, I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is leaving. If he is leaving Ohio State, he's going to leave as decorated Ohio State receivers. When everybody's always asking him, is he the best receiver you've ever seen in Ohio State? I mean, I can put a bunch of guys out there starting like he does with Chris Carter, and then right on down the line. But I think Marvin's going to be the most decorated wide receiver in Ohio State history. A consensus two-time All-American. Only 5 players in Ohio State history have done that. So 5 players, not receivers. So yeah, I mean he's had the year of years in terms of the awards banquet. But of course, as you guys both know and everybody else knows, if they're paying attention to Lettermen Row coverage, he'd much rather have a win over the team up north, a win in the Big Ten championship game, and another shot at a national championship. So how much that sways him down the line remains to be seen.
Yeah, he's a special player, Andy, and just to continue to have him be honored. I know he caught a lot of flack for being the Blitnikoff Award winner last week because some folks thought Roma Dunze should have won it. Some folks thought Malik Neighbors should have won it. And the production was there for both of those guys. But the production was there for Marvin Harrison Jr. And obviously his impact just on the Ohio State offense and just the skill level that he has. I don't think there's any question that he is the best receiver in the country. And now he's starting to be honored as such. Again, unanimous All-American for the second time. Just a completely decorated career that will still have some what ifs, as weird as that is, just because of the losses to Michigan and not being able to win a national championship, Andy.
Yeah, I love numbers, but I think that people get way too into comparing receptions, receiving yards, receiving touchdowns, and saying, well, this guy had more, so why didn't he win the award? Clearly, Malik Neighbors is a really good football player. He's going to be probably a great NFL player. There's a reason why Jaden Daniels won the Heisman Trophy, and Malik Neighbors is a huge part of that process. So great player, but to just put up their stats next to each other isn't necessarily a fair comparison, considering that Marvin Harrison Jr. was covered probably more than any wide receiver in the NFL. They're double covered, bracketed, every which way. So I think his impact still commanding, more than double the receiving targets of any Ohio State player, basically accounting for like a quarter of the touchdowns or maybe more for Ohio State this season. I think that just speaks to his value. And I also think that people say, well, it's not an NFL award, Blitnikoff or all these honors. It's not about who's going to be the best prospect. Well, a lot of times the best prospects are the best players and the people that have the biggest impact. So I think those things go hand in hand.
Yeah. And by the way, Spence, did you vote? Anders, do you vote in Blitnikoff?
Nope.
Marvin won it by 1 vote. He got my vote and he got Spencer's vote. So there you go. Tipping points are sitting right here.
Yeah, I've revealed my ballot pretty publicly, just because I believe in transparency. If you're going to vote on something that's not political, then you should have the conviction to put it out there. I don't think you should necessarily put every vote you make out there, but I voted on the Blitnikoff Award. I had Marvin Harrison Jr. number 1, Rome Odunze number 2, and Malik Neighbors number 3. The only reason I had Malik Neighbors number 3 is because somebody, and I felt bad for doing it, somebody had to finish third. Yeah. And so 3 incredible players. If you could do tied for first, maybe I would have tied all 3 of them because they're just that good. This is probably the hardest decision I've ever had to make on that ballot, and I've been doing this for 5 years now. Tim, you've been doing it a lot longer. This is just an absolute loaded wide receiver group, and all 3 of those guys were consensus All-Americans for a reason. They were all 3, the only 3 that were really showing up on All-American teams because they're that good. But it's very apparent by the fact that he was a Heisman Trophy finalist, by the fact that he is winning awards that are normally restricted to only quarterbacks and running backs in the Big Ten, that he's winning awards that are largely dominated by quarterbacks, is in Big Ten AP Player of the Year, Big Ten Coaches and Media Offensive Player of the Year, the Chicago's Tribune Silver Football. Like, everything that's coming to him is not because his last name is Harrison. No. It's because he's very good. And so his impact stretches far beyond, having 240 receiving yards against Army and running up the score to 60 points. And that's not a knock on Malik Neighbors, but that's just the way that this went. Is I thought the impact of Marvin Harrison Jr. was greater than the impact of Malik Neighbors for sure, and Odunze a little bit, but I thought Odunze was close to Marvin. If there was one decision I had to make, it was Marvin versus Odunze. It wasn't Marvin versus Malik Neighbors.
Yeah, that was me too, and I like Odunze too. I mean, I think it's kind of stupid we have to decide between them, and it does become a quote popularity contest. And I think you agree with me. I think Marvin should have won it last year. So. Call this a career achievement award for him also, the fact that he came back and put up numbers again. And I'm not going to apologize for my vote. I mean, I think the big gripe was that he won by 1 vote, but I mean, there were countless votes for him, and what put him over the top was 1 vote. So if it was mine, I feel really good about it. You know what I mean? Just like, I voted for Michael Penix Jr. for the Heisman number 1. I voted for Marvin number 2, and I voted Jaden Daniels number 3. I'm not going to apologize for that. Michael Penix Jr. I thought had much more of an impact on it for his team, on the national championship race, et cetera. And then Marvin Harrison Jr., like everything you just delineated, deserved to be, in my opinion, number 2 on the Heisman list. I thought Michael Penix Jr. deserved to be number 1 on the Heisman list because of just pure impact he's had on that team for 2 seasons, including getting them into the national championship race. And I'd stack him up with anybody in terms of throwing the football this year, in terms of throwing the football in the clutch this year. I don't know if y'all agree or not, but I know we're not here to discuss the Heisman race, but that's the way I came down on that. And I know Jaden Daniels won, and good for him.
Andy, if you had a Blitnikoff vote, would you be willing to tell what your 3 would look like?
It probably would
have gone Stover, wouldn't you?
Yeah, Kate Stover would. No, I probably definitely would have voted for Marvin first, and then probably Malik second. Just because, it really just depends what you like, right? Malik Neighbors is a yards after catch machine. And Rome Odunze is literally like a 50-50 catch machine. What do you like better? I like both of those guys, but I think the numbers that Malik Neighbors put up, while they aren't the most important thing, what he did after the catch was really marvelous this year. That probably just would have put him at 2, but I don't think you can go wrong with either of these 3 guys. You just had to make your pick, and that's what happened. And
Odunze had some huge catches this year.
Yeah,
if you follow my drift.
Right, and big moments, and that's what I think Spencer was saying, that that's why the impact of those 2 sticks out.
And that's why this award is being talked about so much, not just because the NFL and college football is slanting so much toward wide receivers that in 10 years, if you ask me who won the 2023 Doak Walker Award, I will have no clue and nobody will really care because the running backs, and that's not a knock on running backs, but they're just the value of running backs in the NFL and down to the college level is being minimized more and more every year. And meanwhile, the wide receiver position just continues to skyrocket, which is making this Biletnikoff Award so much more competitive. There were so many options to vote for finalists and then semifinalists, and cutting that list down was really tough for people like me and Tim. And I think that they make it nice where you can only vote for 3, because if you could vote for more, then the voting would have been even more spread out, because there's so many talented wide receivers. But the reason you see a 1 vote result there is because of how good the wide receiver position is becoming and how good a lot of players are. And so I think it's a credit to all 3 of them that it was only 1 vote that Marvin won by, because he is the best receiver in America. And so to make it a 1 vote contest is pretty impressive. We're going to shift gears here a little bit. But before we do, I want to tell you guys about GameTime, the GameTime app, gametime.co. If you use the promo code Buckeyes, you get $20 off your first purchase in the GameTime app. Of course, terms do apply, but they've got tickets to the Cotton Bowl on GameTime and gametime.co and the GameTime app right now. If you're heading to Dallas and you don't have tickets, or if you're heading to Arlington, the big spaceship known as AT&T Stadium, to watch it on the big screen, to catch a little bit of action on the field, go to the GameTime app, gametime.co. Score $20 off your first purchase when you use the promo code Buckeyes. Tim, they also do this fun thing where if you find a ticket on the GameTime app, find one cheaper on a different app that's in the same section or same row, I think you get something in return.
Yeah, you get 110% of the difference back from GameTime, the GameTime app, gametime.co. So that's a hell of a deal. By the way, you can get a Columbus Blue Jackets game tomorrow night for $20 on GameTime. Grab them now. This is a different screen I'm used to working with, this StreamYard, but yeah, it's the place to go, man. Especially for Cotton Bowl tickets, for college football playoff tickets. I'm not going to call it a discount site for college football playoff tickets because they're crazy how much they're going for. Especially the championship game in Houston already is crazy numbers. One of my brother, my lone remaining brother, is trying to figure out a way to get a ticket because he definitely thinks Alabama's going to be there. He lives in Houston, but he's got kinfolks coming in. They're thinking, I told him, we'll check the GameTime app, man. And that's where you can maybe find that ticket of your dreams, but you may have to hold off on your dream boat for this coming spring.
Andy, I believe you're heading back to the homeland at some point for Christmas, maybe over Christmas holiday. You want to go take in the Joel Embiid experience. You want to go watch the Flyers. You want to go see Gritty in person. You can do it on the GameTime app, gametime.co. The best place to buy tickets. Use the promo code Buckeyes. It doesn't matter what ticket you buy. Use that promo code Buckeyes. You get $20 off your first purchase in the GameTime app. Of course, terms do apply. Tim, you dropped a little thing in here we weren't prepared to talk about, but we're going to talk about it now. Travion Henderson and JT Tuimoloau, from what Lettermen Row sources have indicated, are practicing in bowl prep. That's kind of big news.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see how it plays out, right? But man, I'm thinking this has happened, but I don't know this for a fact. My sources haven't told me this, but I would think before practice started formally that Ryan Day had a show of hands. All right, who's playing, who's not? You know what I mean? And you proceed from there, right? Because you can't be. You've only there. Well, what is today's date? Today's the 15th. We're exactly 2 weeks out from the actual game, so you got to know who you're working with. You don't want to be wasting reps in bowl practice at this time. So that I would think that's a harbinger, and I would think that's a nice harbinger because, like Emeka Egbuka said when we got to talk to him this week, he's playing in the game. He isn't defining right now whether he's going to head on and declare for the NFL draft after the game. But all these major guys that we got to talk to this past week are playing in the game. Donovan Jackson, Josh Fryer, right on down the line, Jordan Hancock. So I think that's a harbinger for the game to come. Yeah, I mean, Travion, I would think, has got a real big decision because he's not projected. The last I saw, he wasn't projected in the first round. Maybe y'all have seen something since then for the NFL draft. Maybe not even the second round, which is a little bit mind-boggling for me because he does have big-time upside. And then he'll have an NIL offer of some sort that would at least make it worth his while to stay for his for a fourth year at Ohio State, along with JT Tuimoloau. I do believe from what I'm hearing. So, man, imagine having those kind of decisions, right? It's kind of because you do when you go into the NFL draft, it is a lottery, meaning you don't know if you don't know when your number's going to come up in that definition of lottery. So why not get it while you can, right?
Yeah, I think there is a precedent for a guy suiting up, practicing through the entire bowl practice, and still not playing in the game or coming back to Ohio State. We saw it 2 years ago with Chris Olave, who a lot of the young defensive backs benefited from covering Chris Olave during bowl practice. They benefited from having his veteran leadership and presence in the locker room all the way through December 29th and December 30th, and then in the walkthrough, and then the Rose Bowl on New Year's Day, Chris Olave didn't play. So there is some precedent there. We're not going to get everyone.
Why would you practice and not play? I understand that Denzel Ward did the same thing, so I see where you're coming from there, but I would just lean more toward these guys are going to play.
Yeah, but we can't just get everybody excited thinking everybody's going to play and then all of a sudden So it's not what I'm trying to say is it's not a stone cold lock that these guys are going to play just because they're practicing, but it is a good sign, Andy, if a lot of these guys are practicing that we haven't heard from. We've got concrete decisions from Emeka Ibuka and Jordan Hancock and Donovan Jackson that they are going to play. But some of these guys who didn't speak to us this week, we don't know if they're going to play. But if they're practicing, it's a good sign that they could play, but it's not a guarantee that they will play.
Yeah, Ryan Day, we didn't get to speak to him this week, but he was on 97.1 The Fans Morning Juice yesterday, and this is a quote I'll read. He said, there's a really good group of guys that we feel like are coming back next year. He said some guys have already gone out there, and that's a great opportunity to lead and say, hey, I'm coming back. Who's coming with me here? And let's go build this thing up for next year. So we've got great guys in that locker room and so many guys who understand how important it is to build the team right now. So I think that's a pretty big
what?
hit.
Wait a minute, define what he just said there.
He wouldn't say that if he didn't know that some had already made the decision.
Well, yeah, but he didn't name anybody.
Of course not. Why would he do that? All these guys have to put it on X or whatever you call it now, to make their own decision. But I think it's clear that some people already made the decision internally, to your point, Tim, that moment has probably already passed where there's been a big question of who's coming back. Some of this is, yes, they want to monitor to, figure out what exactly is my draft evaluation or what am I going to do, just play in the bowl and then declare or, not do either. I think there is part of that, but I think some guys have definitely already said, I'm back. And I think that quote certainly hints and maybe even indicates that is what has happened. And I think if you're an Ohio State fan, you got to be excited about that because, people questioned Ryan Day as the head coach of this football program. And I think that, what's happened in the Michigan game certainly can be picked apart and rightfully criticized the last couple of years. But for the culture of this program, you have to say, well, something's being done right. Because if guys want to come back, that says a lot about the head coach. It says a lot about the staff that he has. It says a lot about the culture in the building. Because if there was no solid culture here, guys would be off to the NFL, no question. They wouldn't be playing in this bowl game. They would be opting out. And I think that is telling. And I think people need to pay attention to that right now.
Yeah, that it matters. That's the point. That stuff matters to them. I believe Marvin Harrison Jr., when he talked about losing not having a pair of gold pants and not beating Michigan and not playing in a Big Ten championship game, that matters to him. Why else would he say it, right? And because we all know Marvin, boy, he speaks from his heart, from what I've been around him. And so you're right. The culture is strong, but it's funny when you face these decisions as a 20, 21-year-old, 22-year-old man, young man, about your future. Those are tough. Those are tough questions to answer.
Ryan Day also said, and we'll go back into his 97.1 The Fan interview with Morning Juice from Thursday. Devin and I sat down and talked about this. Day said, this is a great opportunity for Devin to take over this team and to run with it. I know he's very, very excited about that. We can confirm Devin Brown is excited about that. We talked to him at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center on Tuesday. He seemed very upbeat. He seemed ready to be a leader in this situation. He seemed ready to prove himself. And that all but confirms, Devin had said he was going to start. Nobody really questioned who was going to start in this game. But the fact that you're starting to hear it from Ryan Day that this is an opportunity for Devin leads you to believe that 33 will be the starting quarterback for the Buckeyes in the Cotton Bowl. Obviously not completely confirmed, but all signs point to this being Devin Brown's opportunity, Tim, to finally showcase what he can do in a larger setting over a couple weeks of practice with just number one players, because he was practicing with the twos at least part of the time, or if not most of the time, in training camp. Now he gets to take the reins with the ones, run with that for a couple weeks, and then show himself with the ones in the Cotton Bowl. And by the way, all of the weapons seem to be playing in the game as well to give him a full complement of options to throw to and hand off to, when he gets into that game.
Yeah, I mean, it's Devin Brown's time, and we all talked to him. I asked him, almost point blank. I mean, he wants to grab it and run with it and throw with it. The last time we saw him, he was pretty much running with it, and that cost him half a season. Just when it was obvious Ryan Day was trying to work him into the rotation, so to speak, for an option down in the red zone. But then maybe, we all know Cal McCord had some great stats. We all know Cal McCord kind of faded a few times in the middle of games. And sometimes you want an alternative to throw in there. And just when it was looking like Ohio State might have one, Devin Brown suffered that high ankle sprain. So against Penn State. And he thought he scored on that play, but replay showed he didn't. But the bottom line is, he's fired up. And this is the thing, guys. We were taping a Channel 10 thing the other night for Wall to Wall Sports, and I didn't get apoplectic. I don't even know what the word is, but I got riled up by this idea that there are a lot of fans calling for Lincoln Keno's to be the guy in the bowl game, and I'm just going. Number one, Devin Brown was a 5-star prospect coming out of high school. He wasn't some fluky guy they got out of the West, a 2-star who's just trying to prove himself. I mean, this guy is a big-time prospect. We haven't seen him play a lot, so it's hard to really say what he brings to the table from the standpoint of proven. But he's big. He's pretty damn fast. He's not afraid to run the ball. He gives you that threat. And then on top of that, he can throw the ball. And, we heard all these things coming out of preseason camp about how he was inconsistent, had some turnovers, et cetera, which cost him maybe at the most critical times of that assessment process. But at times in the preseason camp, he was number one over Cal McCord. It seemed to change from day to day. And Lincoln Keno's, bless his heart, is a tremendous athlete, as we all know. Just watch him do that backflip, but that's about the best video you've got of him so far is him doing a backflip on social media. He played a little bit, but it's Devin Brown's turn. And the idea that you're going to find somebody necessarily in the transfer portal who's going to be at the level of a Devin Brown, I still got to happen. As we record this, I don't think they've gotten that guy yet. You know what I mean? And we'll see if they end up getting a big time name, if in fact that's what you call it, out of the transfer portal. But this is Devin Brown's moment. And I expect him to seize it. I expect him to make some mistakes, and I expect him to make some plays. That's what I expect to see.
Andy, I think it would be a different story if a lot of these guys were opting out of the bowl game. If you had no Emeka Egbuka, if you had no, we don't know about Travion Henderson for sure yet, but if he was certainly not playing, if a lot of the defensive guys opted out, you could use this as a glorified exhibition practice type deal, and maybe split some reps with Devin Brown and Lincoln Keno's, give them both a chance to kind of show themselves. But the fact that a lot of these guys are playing, even if they're not coming back, they're playing in this game. We don't know if they're coming back or not, but everyone seems to be on board with playing in this game. That gives you more of incentive, in my opinion, to go out and just win the game and make sure that you're putting the best possible team on the field. And right now, I think that's Devin Brown for sure over Lincoln Keenholz. That's not a knock on Keenholz. It's just the fact that he's a young guy who, arrived at Ohio State 6 months ago. You can't just hand him the keys to the offense against a top 12 SEC team. So I think that is part of the reason why you're seeing so much about Devin Brown and this being his moment, but also he's paid his dues. It's time to give him a chance to take over this thing. What do you think, Andy?
Well, regardless of who opted out, they were always going to try to win this game. I think that, Devin Brown probably still would have been the guy. And I think that, this is really Lincoln Kienholz's spring season. He didn't play spring ball. He wasn't here for those practices. This bowl season, that's a makeup for those practices he wasn't there for. Now, of course, he's off winning a baseball state championship. He pretty much won a state championship in every sport you could play in South Dakota there. Great athlete, as Tim mentioned. Like, certainly someone that is intriguing for the future of this program. But we saw him throw 5 passes. He was mostly asked to hand the ball off. And look, everyone looks good throwing against air, right? Before the games, I get it. There's excitement. He's definitely got a moxie to him, a savvy to him.
Yes.
So does Devin Brown. And, I think that, it's his time, as you guys said. And I think that, we're in the holiday season. Toys are coming underneath the Christmas tree, and everyone wants to see that shiny new toy. And I think that when you haven't really seen too much of it, there's all the high expectations of what it could be. And I think that's kind of the effect with a lot of recruits that come in to Ohio State. They've got a lot of good, just ratings or just stories about what they've done in high school and leading up to this point. And I think that's reasonable to build up some expectation. I think that's what you have with Lincoln Kienholz. Not to say he won't live up to that, but right now I think that's what people are kind of leaning on. But when in fact, Devin Brown also has some of those high expectations. Also was an Elite 11 finalist. Also was a 5-star recruit, actually much higher rated recruit than Lincoln Kienholz. And I think that the dual threat ability of him has to be intriguing for Ohio State fans. And the comments of Ryan Day kind of let you to believe a little bit that, hey, maybe they're not really looking at the portal as hard right now. And that's not to say they won't in the spring, because there is that window too. But right now it feels like this is Devin Brown's stage for this audition.
Yeah, and with these toys, like you said, that are under the tree, batteries included.
Yeah. If Ohio State's at full strength for the Cotton Bowl, we'll learn a lot about the roster. But I did want to touch quickly, and I don't know how much of an opinion either of you guys have on this, but Ohio State is hosting 2 guys from the transfer portal this weekend. Hosted one last weekend, Derek Harmon, defensive tackle from Michigan State. He'll be visiting Oregon, according to some On3 folks, this weekend. So we'll see how that plays out. Buckeyes were slated to host Trey Moore, the UTSA defensive end. They were slated to host Marley Cook, the defensive tackle from Middle Tennessee State. Ohio State and Marley Cook kind of parted ways, according to Lettermen Row sources. It just wasn't going to be a fit. And then Trey Moore, folks that I've talked to, folks that Pete Nakos over at On3 have talked to, said that Trey Moore, Ohio State canceled that visit. So it gives you some optimism again. So good direction there, that Ohio State feels good about its defensive end options to not go get one of the most productive defensive ends in the country this year, even if it was at UTSA. But the Buckeyes will still host 2 guys from the transfer portal. That will be Kamari Ramsey, the defensive back from UCLA. He is a guy that Ohio State, from what I understand, really has taken a liking to so far in this process. And I think, after a couple visits there, Ohio State will have a better answer. And then the Buckeyes are also going to host, Caleb Elam's-Orr, linebacker from Cal, one of the Pac-12's leading tacklers from a year ago. Really quick guy, twitchy guy who just kind of shoots when he sees a lane and gets to contact. I like both of these guys. So I don't know if either of you have any thoughts. Maybe I'll start with you this time, Andy. These sound like good players that Ohio State could add. Like it's just one of those things. I'll have a preview of it at lettermenrow.com. But these are 2 guys that the Buckeyes see from the Pac-12 that could be value adds if things go well on these visits.
Well, Ryan Day was asked about, what is the process with the transfer portal for Ohio State? A lot of it comes down to, scholarship numbers. It comes down to positions of need. Well, you just mentioned 2 positions of potential need. Linebacker, we don't know the situation with Steel Chambers, but it's certainly all signs are pointing to Tommy Eichenberg leaving for the NFL. That opens up a starting spot. We assume that Cody Simon will slide in, but who knows, who's going to be beside him next season. Having linebacker depth in general is important, so that one makes sense to me. And then the safety position, who knows what Lathan Ransom is going to do. Josh Proctor will be gone. You want to have depth. Certainly there was injuries at that position this year. Josh Proctor missed a couple of games. Jahad Carter, who was a depth piece, was hurt for a bit of this season. Lathan Ransom, of course, got hurt during this season. So you want to have depth in that back end. And some of those transfer portal ads in the back end have been really great these last few years. Tanner McAllister, I know he had an up and down year, but he was then starting nickel safety in 2022. And then this past season, you have, Davison Igbinosun is probably the most important transfer you had at the cornerback position. So those secondary additions in the transfer portal have been pretty crucial for Ohio State the last couple of years. So it doesn't surprise me at all that they're dipping back in to try to see what they can get over there.
And Jihad Carter was coming on. I mean, actually, he played at the end of the year and stuff, but he got hurt and stuff that hurt him. But you're right. I mean, the canceling of the kid like from UTSA. Ohio State's doing its vetting process too on these guys. And Ryan Day is really big on the culture fit aspect of things. As he's used that a million times, that explanation, and you don't want to bring in, this isn't knocking that young man. I'm not even going to name him, but you don't want to bring in people that you think aren't going to fit in the room, from the standpoint of, for whatever reasons. I'm not even going to throw out the reasons that could be, but they're the guy that they brought in and we didn't see a lot of that I was intrigued by when they first brought him in. For example, this past year was Tywan Malone, another kid from Ole Miss, young man from Ole Miss, and we'll see what happens with him as this year goes on. But Davison Igbinosun was a great example of a right guy at the right time and a great fit, and so that's what they're always looking for. Just like in the quarterback situation, it's kind of like you don't want to. You judge these guys and you look at their upside. You're looking at Devin Brown's upside. Devin Brown has a tremendous upside. He has as big an upside as almost anybody you can name that's in the portal. I mean, for example, Ungalele, who is I always throw an extra lay in there. For example, moving on. A lot of people thought he was the answer at Clemson. He goes to Oregon State, and now all of a sudden he was in the portal again, and you're just kind of going, you've got a lot of video on this guy to decide why maybe he doesn't fit, in your situation. And several of these other guys, Dante Moore, the kid, I think from UCLA, right? I mean, tremendous upside for that guy, but he was a turnover machine, this last season when he got his shot. And so right on down the line, you've got to be real careful, especially in the quarterback situation, in my opinion, in this day and age, because quarterbacks have been transferring ever since I started covering college football. And now with the immediate gratification of getting to play somewhere else, they're expecting that aspect of it. And you don't want a sourpuss sitting in your quarterback room, and they've been pretty lucky in that regard. But I think Devin Brown's going to prove, he almost proved it in preseason, but he's going to prove, I think, over the next several months why he probably deserves that first shot of being the 2024 starting quarterback for the Buckeyes.
And that's why Ohio State is being very deliberate in the transfer portal. They're being very patient in the transfer portal. I'm sorry if that's bad news for you, and I'm talking to the viewer and
not
the listener.
me. You're talking about to the listeners.
I'm sorry if that's bad news for you that Ohio State's being patient and deliberate and calculated in its transfer portal additions. But guess what? There's a lot of momentum right now that some of these juniors are going to come back. And there's a groundswell, a little bit of momentum that will be the case. And so Ohio State's not going to go I'll just say names. They're not going to go target Walter Nolan, who the priorities weren't where Ohio State aligns with in recruiting. They're not going to be there 2 years later when he's in the transfer portal. They're not just going to go randomly grab, top player X from the transfer portal at any position, let alone quarterback. Because there's some turnover machines in there who have great highlight tapes, but don't really look like down to down that they can get it done. So Ohio State knows it could use help in the back end. What's it doing? It's bringing in a solid player who they think can value add in the room. Kamari Ramsey at UCLA. If he commits to Ohio State, he would be a value add for Ohio State. They're bringing in a linebacker to help with C.J. Hicks and Cody Simon, who appear to be in line to be the two starting linebackers this year. Caleb Elam's-Orr has 100 and some odd tackles in the Pac-12. He can play at a high level. They think they can add him. That's very deliberate in the way that they are approaching the transfer portal. If you don't need top-end defensive ends, and now that the NIL equation's there, you're not going to pay for a top-end defensive end if you've already got guys in the room who are going to be good enough. You're not going to overpay for a defensive end that's in the transfer portal. It's the same thing at corner and at offensive line. If you've got 4 or 5 starters coming back, you got 4 starters coming back. You're not going to go grab a tackle that's asking for way more money and then not even know if he's going to start. So, like, the Buckeyes are being very pointed in what they're doing in the transfer portal.
Judicious.
I know that's not the answer a lot of people want because they want activity. But bad activity is not the answer. Activity is not always the answer. It's not like they're just sitting there. They're talking to people. They're watching the film. They're gathering details. And the fact that they're being patient, Andy, in the portal tells me they have a good idea of what they're going to do.
Wait, let me throw one line in there from the Christmas season. Remember, what's it called? Christmas Vacation, where the little girl says when the grandfather's knocking Griswold for the lights not coming on, his daughter says to the grandfather, "He works really hard," and the grandfather says, "So do washing machines."
Yeah,
Clark Griswold. Well, I couldn't remember his name. I don't know. I've watched that movie 4,000 times.
But Ohio State's not just going to go into the portal to go.
No, they're not.
So, Andy, I just I'm not frustrated with the fan base, but also activity is not always the answer here when it comes to the portal.
Well, you want activity. They're about to sign 22 guys. So high school recruits still exist, people. And they're coming and signing day.
Aaron Nolan's coming.
Yeah, signing day is approaching. And that, Matt Parker at lettermenrow.com covers all that along with Alex Gleitman, and got great stuff on site right now about all of that. And those are guys that are coming in, and the 85 scholarship limit exists. And that's something that also factors in to this transfer portal discussion. Ryan Day was asked also on 97.1 The Fan, were you surprised about how many guys have left the program so far? 14, 11 total left last year. He said, no, with COVID, there was 5 years, there was going to be this kind of effect of players that had the extra year. It was going to affect the scholarship count. It was going to affect the roster management. This is what's happening. There are going to be guys that are leaving. We kind of, he didn't say this, but what he was kind of getting at is we kind of need that. You need to lose some weight. You need to shed off some of that because you're bringing in new guys every year. Some guys aren't going to work out. That's just the reality of all these programs across the country. But some of them are going to work out, and you need to have room for the young guys to come in. And that's part of this roster bind right now. He said right now they're probably going to be a little bit over the 85 going into the spring. They're going to need to work that out. That means they don't have a whole lot of flexibility to be adding 10 guys in the portal. I mean, they might add 5, 6, 7, maybe. I don't know. I mean, it depends on who else leaves, right? But at this point, you can't be adding guys recklessly because you don't know who's going to leave yet. And so they can't be committing and offering guys they don't know they can really give a spot to. And I think that's a big part of this process. And that's kind of the other side of guys potentially coming back but not making the decision yet. Yeah,
and let's be straight up too here. When you lose your starting quarterback to the portal, and that was a tough moment because there's a guy that started 13 games, and that's a lot. That's a lot of investment by the Ohio State football program in a player who has now decided to move on. Meaning, from an experience standpoint, that is really tough to replicate in the transfer portal, etc. Yet you don't want a disgruntled person sitting in that position also. I have not talked to Cal McCord, in terms of what caused him finally to definitely leave. But the bottom line is he is gone. That is a major blow from an investment standpoint, but you're looking for a higher upside there is what you're looking for, because for whatever reason, they didn't produce the touchdowns this year like they've been used to in the past. And that's what it comes down to, is production from the quarterback standpoint. Devin Brown could be that guy. And like you said, in the portal right now, who is that guy that fits that bill that you're used to? I see some guys that possibly could be, but not proven.
That's why Ohio State's being very cautious and deliberate and intentional in the way that it's attacking the transfer portal, with National Signing Day coming up, with the Cotton Bowl prep in full swing, with players making decisions on their NFL futures or their Ohio State futures, and with Tim, who has, I see a polo and a long sleeve shirt on. That can only mean one thing. We've made him We've made him late to his tea time, ladies and gentlemen. He's got to get the hell out of here and go swing the sticks. Andy Backstrom and I are going to get back to work. Tim's going to hit the links. Tim, hit them straight, man.
I'm still working. I'm still thinking football when I'm playing golf. That's why my golf game sucks.
That's exactly why. We'll just go ahead and blame it. That's what I do every time I hit the links, Tim. For Tim May, the 40-year vet, he's going to go bundle up and hit the golf course. Andy Backstrom on the other side of that screen. I'm just Spencer Holbrook. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening to the latest video presented by Lettermen Row. And we'll see you guys over at lettermenrow.com.